Okay, sorry. No time for a really funny intro this time. I wanted to do a alternative bracket from a different perspective, with some stats to back it up for things that I do think could happen in the tournament, because I really don't think one bracket is enough to just show exactly what you think is going to occur. And I know I talked about some alternatives, but I want to show it to you actually. And some of them might be the same because I might be very confident in them, and if I was kind of entering, one specific one in just for, hey, this is your only bracket, yes, I would still do the first one, but this one is still one that I would feel very confident in as well. Most of the stuff I would say I do has like two brackets anyways this year or any year. And, I think with this tournament specifically, I think at least at the end with this, like, not the most ever, but a lot more title contenders than you would think, basically all the one seeds and everything. So I want to get another video out kind of portraying the different regions of, hey, a lot of people I think makes two brackets. That's where I like. So let's go ahead and see what happens there. But I want to try and go through this bracket using a lot of predictive percentage stuff from the other perspective. And metrics, and then I'm going to show you the alternative bracket, like I said, and bring in a new stat that I've been learning about and researching, called shot volume index, and I've fallen in love with it. Credit to Will Warren for me reading this and everything, and it was a great stat I found. Before you ask questions of what it is, no, I haven't gotten any sleep. I stayed up all night, so but you're not supposed to ask questions. You're the listener, so go ahead and be a viewer and just listen to this stat right here that I found. Shot volume index. It measures essentially how many field goal attempts a team would make in 100 possessions. When you hear a lot of stuff like, oh, per 100 possessions, that's just because 100 possessions is like a kind of base that people use to try and make it easier to understand certain stuff. Obviously, you're not going to get 100 possessions all the time, in a game. That's never going to happen. But it's almost kind of like the per 40 minutes, you're trying to quantify where a player is playing the same amount of minutes. Per 100 possessions, teams play different amount of possessions throughout the game, so you want a stat that tells you where every single team is at the same amount of possessions, and 100's a round number. And this basically, it measures how many field goal attempts would a team would make in 100 possessions, assuming average shooting accuracy, but specifically no free throws. Actually just from the field, like in the game, in the play of game and everything. Essentially, it shows how good a team is at giving themselves as many possessions as possible during a game, and just as many shots at the apple. Because, obviously the free throw line is where some teams kind of try and make their bread and butter, but rarely, if ever, are you going to have a team that actually takes advantage of the free throw line, because you're going to leave some out there. So in reality, obviously, a shot from the field is better than a free throw shot, because obviously 1 point versus 2 or maybe even 3. So this tries to measure how teams are in terms of actual shots on the field. Now, why does that really matter? Obviously, this stat doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to win if you have a higher, but basically it can be helped to use to show how conflicting, like a very high conflicting teams in this stat, it might very heavily favor one team or the other. And it gives them a higher likelihood of winning if there's a giant disparity gap there, because it kind of measures basically on how good each team is, like on average, offensively and defensively. Because obviously anything can happen in basketball. It's a one game of basketball, so the extra possessions that a team has are super important. Essentially how the stat works is it kind of just quantifies how many possessions and field goals made or attempted that a team would be able to have per 100 possessions, and then it takes that and subtracts it by how much you allow. And so then you obviously want a positive thing there, and it essentially tells you, okay, how many extra possessions can you have by taking into account, turnover percentage in terms of how much you turn the ball over or you force turnovers, offensive rebounds, and all that stuff. And it tries to say, okay, this is one number that you can use of say, hey, you gain this many extra possessions. And more possessions is obviously good for you because that's more chances at getting a shot in the basket and obviously taking leads. It's very important specifically for here because extra possessions are very important, especially when we're at the most points per possession in the history of college basketball. On average, there is a guaranteed point per possession. Obviously, that's not how it really works, but when you divide them, it gives you 1.062, which is the highest ever. The effective field goal percentage, obviously it's a stat, your field goal percentage taking into account a 3-point being worth more than a 2-point. It's one of the most valuable stats for a team, and it's almost at the highest point ever. With all of those things taken into account, possessions matter so much because offenses have never been better, but more specifically limiting the other team's possessions matters a lot while still being efficient. You can't just have the other team have less possessions and then not be able to do anything with it. Teams can have hot nights and streaks and everything, and they might not need this stat at all. And that obviously can happen. And we're going to see some in this tournament that will fit this for sure, but you just can't predict it. For predictive purposes, it's a good thing to look at. And like we said, a team can try and minimize that risk by gaining extra offensive possessions, but more so taking possessions away from the other team that they don't have anymore. Again, it's essentially just trying to increase your percentage chance that you win by getting more shots, at least towards the basket for a chance for you to win. So SVI is what's called shot volume index. So shot volume index is basically your offensive shot value minus your defensive shot value. Like we said, how much you actually gain shot value, meaning taking into account turnovers, offensive rebounds, stuff like that, versus how much you give up. Like, do you allow a lot of teams to get extra possessions? Essentially, for the average field this year, 5.1, positive 5.1 is good. 8.5 or higher is really good. I'd say probably 5.1 is actually kind of average. And then weak is 2 or lower. But they quantify it. They separate it into just games that were played against top 150 teams, as well as games that were on the road or neutral. And obviously those are much lower. So the average for top 150 is like +1. A good one is +5, but a bad one's like -2.3, meaning you're literally, losing possessions on average during a game. And for the road and on neutral sites, it's kind of the same exact thing. It basically shows you, are you able, sorry for the long, explanation, by the way, I'm crazy on Monster because I need to stay up all night. It shows you, are you able to win in different ways, even when you're not fully on your game shooting? Or your opponent is. Because if it can just help cover so many grounds if you are able to still win games when you're not making shots, and that's because you're gaining extra possessions while also taking away possessions from the other team that they could have had. And so it's a very big stat that helps minimize risk in teams having off nights, because you can't predict off nights. You can't do it. And this, I think, is a stat that does help with that. Again, it's not the end-all be-all. Just like kill shots, they aren't the end-all be-all. These other stats we say, nothing is a perfect just look at it stat. It's all matchup based, but it's good to look at, because if there's a big disparity, there could be an issue. Or if there's a high team that's not great in this stat, they don't go too far. It's almost kind of like overseeded teams that we see in the chart there. Sometimes they don't go too far. But this year's offensive shot volume is the highest it's ever been among the field. And I'm not lying when I tell you we're in the midst of the most dominant level seasons that we've ever seen from just teams, not just one seeds, but it is mainly them, because they're obviously at the top and they fit so much into the historical greatest one seeds ever, and they don't really lack in any analytical point of view or anything like that. And these 4 one seeds, they all sit top 10 all time in offensive shot volume. since the stat was a thing back in 2002. All of the ones above them made the title game, and only one of them didn't, and it was Houston last year who lost their best player, and I think they would have made it if they would have made at least the Final Four if they did it. And all of the ones above the 4-1 seeds made the title game. And obviously you can't have 4 teams making the title game. So wrapping that around your head, like the 1 seeds this year, I can't tell you enough. It is just crazy how good they are, especially historically. And in terms of shot volume index, taking into account defense as well, it'll be the first time since 2008 that all 1 seeds have a shot value index of 6 or more. So +6. Who was in the Final Four in 2008? All 1 seeds. It's one of the very few times we had all 1 seeds all in the Final Four. 1 seeds with at least a shot volume index of at least 6 have an average number of wins in the tournament of 3.4. That's an average of the Elite 8 and more, because it's almost 0.5. So that's an average for 1 seeds of the Elite 8 and Final Four. That's the average. Insane. Now, again, it's not just the end-all be-all stat. There are teams with high shot volume indexes that even the person who pioneered this and that I learned it from, they're not picking them to go as far as expected. You have to use all the stuff that I've been trying to help teach you with as well. But it's another thing we can throw in there along with kill shots and everything else that we've been looking at. In terms of percentages right now, it's the highest percentage chance to make the Final Four by all 1 seeds ever. We've never had a year where like all the 1 seeds are this high of a percent chance to make the Final Four. Yet at the same time, with all the historical accomplishments I just talked to you about for these 1 seeds, it's still more likely than not that all 4 don't get in. But it is a comfortable margin in terms of like it's not hey, it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. If it were to happen, it would be this year. The odds are saying that it probably won't, but if it were to, I think the odds are like 1 in 5 or something like that. 20%, not a lot. If it were to, though, the stats I'm telling you, it seems like it would be this year. It's a 58% chance that a 1 seed loses on the first weekend per Ken Pom, and at Evan Mia, it's at 63% chance that a 1 seed loses in the first weekend. Is it going to happen? I don't know. The main culprit here is Houston because of Gonzaga's crazy seeding, but 1 seeds with at least an 80% chance to make the Sweet 16 are 20 and 23, and all 3, in terms of the 1 seeds, not including Houston, because Houston, is being screwed over by Gonzaga. All 3 of the other 1 seeds are much better than the 3 teams that lost in that 20-3 record. And Houston could easily get in there. It's just, obviously if they were in this group, they would be there. But the little Gonzaga thing is giving them a slightly less than 80% chance to make the Sweet 16. So I know you're like, what the hell are you talking about, Stone? There's a lot of conflicting stats here. I looked at so much different stuff, and it's hard to really digest, which is why I think a matchup style for picking brackets is good, but it can be a real big disaster if it doesn't go well, and one thing can change it all. And just for bracket purposes, I think, there is value in picking like, one seed to lose early this year. Is there value? Potentially. Sorry, I kind of made a statement. I was phrasing it as a question. Is there value to picking a 1 seed to lose this year? I don't think so. I don't think there is value in just you picking a bracket. You might listen and say, okay, the odds that a 1 seed loses early / doesn't even make the Elite 8, just from a bracket perspective, are pretty high, but these 1 seeds are like fitting groups that we've never seen. So is there value in picking a 1 seed to lose early? Not really. Are the top 4 1 seeds, so every 1 seed plus Tennessee, those are the candidates that realistically have a chance to win it all. There's no value in picking a 1 seed to lose in the first weekend, I'm saying, because any of them could win. Literally any of them. Any 1 seed could win this tournament. And it is not a guarantee that one of them does. Like, there's not a guarantee, nope, they're not winning it. Like, Duke, Houston, Florida, Auburn. Any of those 4 could win it all. So, do I say that you can't have them in the Sweet 16, or you can't have them in the Elite 8 or Sweet 16? No. I'm just saying for first weekend going out purposes, because I've seen some people throwing around stuff. I just obviously mentioned why Houston wasn't in these analytical stuff. It's just because of the Gonzaga matchup. If that wasn't the case, they would be. And even then, we can dive into later if it even is going to happen in my second alternative bracket. It might, but I'll let you know. And then just here's another thing you can look at. We have a 16% chance for all 1 seeds to be in the Elite 8. 16%. That's not a lot. But we've never seen teams as strong as these 4 1 seeds make anything less than the Elite 8 besides one Gonzaga team. And they obviously play in a weaker conference. Yet we have a 5% chance of all 1 seeds in the Final Four. What I said earlier, 1 out of 5 chance, I meant all the 1 seeds in the Elite 8. I just realized I slipped up there. We have a 1 in 5 chance of every single 1 seed being in the Elite 8. And we have a 5% chance of all of them being in the Final Four. But they fit all the metrics of the greatest 1 seeds ever. And like I just mentioned, the shot in terms of shot variability, they literally fit 2008, which was literally every single 1 seed in the national or in the Final Four. And they are presumably like the greatest 1 seed bunch ever. It's hard to determine like what's going to budge. The just actual like, hey, percentage chance of this happening, bracketology kind of stuff, or the actual just team performance and everything. I don't know. It's hard. This isn't pertaining to 1 seeds specifically, but what I said based on correlation scores, I mean, you should expect to pick up around like 4 to 5 round 1 upsets, which would be among some of the lowest ever for this tournament. I didn't pick a single 1 through 3 seed to lose, and I only had 1 4 seed to lose because obviously what I explained, the history there is correlated to having the from I think the correlation score from last episode, it was like 2019 and then one other year, I can't remember, but they essentially had no 1 through 3 seeds losing in the first round, a 4 seed lost, and then obviously you have your 12s and 11s, but only 1 4 seed loss. But the second reason is because just the pure strength in the competition. This is the best 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, and 4 seed group that we've ever seen. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. Combined, it's the biggest efficiency margin gap between the top 4 seeds and the bottom 4 seeds ever. Literally ever. And, 13 seed is realistically where you kind of start to look. And even then, it's just kind of 1. I think that would happen, like a 1 13 over 4, and it could not happen. I don't know. And then you get into your 12s and 11s, and that's really where you get it. This year is projected to have around 4.28 upsets, so somewhere around 4 upsets in the first round. And then based on historical, the round of 32 is supposed to be around 3 to 4, but it could also be around 2 upsets in the round of 32, so second round. So what does all that mean? I know I just said a ton of stuff. To just like summarize before we get into the actual bracket predictions, I just want to place in your mind the shot value index in terms of what it does, giving teams a much higher floor of, hey, even if you're not having a great shooting night because it's so variable, do you still have the ability to gain extra possessions and extra shots at the rim to, help your chances of winning the game? And just the pure gall of, these are the greatest 1 seeds we've ever seen, but the percentages don't say that they should all make the heights that they look like they can reach. And what do we go with there? And if we follow the pure numbers, who's going to do it? Who would possibly do that? And just also how many upsets you really should be having. I kind of listed it already. I probably should have said this maybe in the middle, but like I just said, first round, I think you're probably looking at around 4 upsets, 113/4, and a combination. I guess you could say 5 as well. A combination of 4 or 3 if you're stingy, but I say 4, 12s, and 11s. Could be 3 as well, but that's kind of what we're looking at here. And 7/10 is not an upset. We didn't really count that. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of making our bracket. So again, what does all mean? Enough of me yapping. I'll take you through region by region and kind of just go over some things I really want to emphasize and just give you an alternative perspective on. If I don't talk about the matchup or anything, you already see a result there. Just assume it's going to be the same, or there's nothing substantial to really go over, or there's maybe nothing different I want to say that I haven't already mentioned. So let's just go ahead and dive into the alternative bracket so I can take you through the different possibilities I think I could see happening that were different from the ones that I had. Okay, so with the first region here, the South, Louisville, I went over their matchup stuff again, and they just have so many pluses on Creighton. Creighton prefers a slower pace. A lot of stuff we already mentioned in the last episode. Louisville doesn't really play at that. They're great at fouling, or not fouling, Creighton is, but Louisville doesn't rely on getting to the line. 45% of Creighton's points are from the 3, yet they don't get extra possessions at all. It's a road game, and Creighton has one of their highest kill shots conceded per game in the tournament of any just 9 seed in general or better. Their shot volume index is terrible. It's in the negative, so they lose possessions, and it's like even worse on road games / neutral sites, and that's what this is for Louisville, and Louisville's is actually pretty positive. I'm very confident in Louisville, honestly. I just wanted to explain that pick. I'm pretty confident in taking them here. So I would very much suggest Louisville. It's just a very good matchup there. Again, it's March. Anything could happen. But these 8-9 matchups, especially in my league, it's very hard to really get them all right. A lot of times, people that get the most of them right end up being near the top because you get the seed value, but you don't really end up winning it just based on these matchups because it all kind of evens out hey, some people get them right, wrong. Rarely are you going to have a guy get all 4 of them wrong. And if they do, the rest of their bracket's probably not perfect anyways. So with here, I think it's good to maybe find an 8-9 matchup that you're pretty confident in. And I would say for me personally, that is Louisville and Creighton. And then Michigan, UC San Diego. The more I think about it with UC San Diego, the more I hate having the obvious upset pick. I'm not going to change it, and I will have I'll have it in my first one, so I won't change it in my first one, the one I just showed you guys. But just with this here, UC San Diego obviously has the big turnover mismatch. But at some point, how many turnovers can you really get in a game? It doesn't feel like it's just an immediate multiplier of oh yeah, this is going to happen. And to be honest, the thing that you should look at really is Michigan has played teams that force a ton of turnovers before, and obviously Michigan gives it up a lot, and they've won them. They've had no problem being able to get by that kind of issue and win these games. The shot volume index is just a ridiculous difference in favor of UC San Diego, so that's why I'm not changing it in my first one. And Michigan's ceiling is not very high if they win this game, so I don't expect this as some big change up or anything. But it is objectively a very close matchup overall with the amount of possessions UC San Diego can have, but also just the difference in how many free points Michigan's going to have. They're just going to have so many free points, and a 2-point is obviously more reliable than a 3-point, just objectively speaking. The closer you are to the rim, the more likely you are to make it, and Michigan's going to have so many safe free points that it's hard to really just discount that. The real objective difference in UC San Diego's matchup with its kind of perimeter game and turnovers and threes are just, like I said, objectively not safer, just compared to Michigan's size, 2-point buckets, ability to defend. So I do want to show what they would look like, obviously, winning in a bracket here, because it's very possible. It is. It might even happen more than not because so many people are picking this matchup, and it makes me more worried now. But the numbers do just support it, and I love the Tritons, so I'm going to keep with it in my first one. But for the second one, I think it's worthy having it switch up here. And then Yale and A&M, you see it's not touched or anything. I just want to do a little note on this game. I think A&M could absolutely win, but I'm going to stick with Yale. I'm going to stick with Yale again here with the value, and I'm going to explain why even more. Yale is the best 13 seed in shot volume index. Very big, and it's not even close. Just for Texas A&M, this is probably the worst matchup they could have possibly got. Texas A&M is very high in shot volume index, obviously because they get so many offensive rebounds. But Yale actually does a good job forcing teams to take jump shots. Which would suck for A&M. Yale is the third most allowed three-point attempts, and that's not just them being like, oh yeah, we forget to guard them. It's having your defense aligned to where you are allowing threes, but two teams that are not really wanting to take them, and that is the pure definition of Texas A&M. If this game is going back and forth and it's being a jump shot kind of game, A&M is going to hate that. They're screwed. They shoot terribly. They win based on getting offensive rebounds. And with it being a slower pace, that's what Texas A&M prefers, but there's less, there's not really a chance to, take advantage of some sort of matchup because Yale also is fine with that, and they kind of prefer that. But Yale is also top 22 in offensive rebounds allowed, so they don't, which is good. They don't really allow a lot of offensive rebounds. Now, with Texas A&M being number one in the country, they're still going to get more, but it's not as much as you would think for other teams. And Yale is also top 3 in the tournament in kill shots. They are number 1 in kill shot margin. Look at this graph right here. It is adjusted for opponent. So McNeese State back there, they do have some of the highest kill shots in the game, in the tournament, but it's adjusted for competition and your opponents. Yale is literally on the side of the screen. They're that far. That's literally how far they are. I see Texas A&M is there too, but Yale's literally all the way over there. So with Yale's, obviously offensively, they don't really have any issues, and you would still look at it and be like, okay, Yale shoots better objectively, but they shoot better, and their shot volume index is not going to be that big of a difference. It is favoring Texas A&M, but not by that much. And with it being a lower pace game and Yale being so good at kill shots, that means it gives them more of a chance to go on a run. And if it's a slow pace game like Texas A&M wants to play, it's going to be harder for you to get back into this game, and they're going to have to play faster. And when the game's faster, Yale is going to make them shoot jump shots, and Texas A&M sucks at that. So I think all that stuff just really bodes well for Yale, and that's why I'm sticking with that matchup there. And then one that I think I deserve to go into more because I had some questions about it was UNC Ole Miss. I should have dove more into this one. Ole Miss does not like the faster paced games, and UNC will do that for sure. But it's kind of the same way, the other way around. Ole Miss doesn't really turn the ball over. And UNC doesn't really force turnovers, but UNC does take care of the ball, so it's kind of they're kind of just tugging back and forth, but no one's really winning because there's not going to really be a big margin that Ole Miss has in the turnover margin because UNC does do a good job taking care of the ball, and if they take care of the ball and Ole Miss takes care of the ball, it doesn't really matter who gets the most turnovers, even if UNC is a poor job in taking them, because it'll just be pure offense on offense and just, hey, guard up and we'll see who can do that. And in that case, Ole Miss is going to get pounded on the glass because you have to look at other aspects. They are terrible at rebounding, and UNC is average, but they're much taller, and they're going to be much better than Ole Miss because Ole Miss is so terrible at rebounding, specifically offensive rebounding. and their shot value index are like similarly low, both of them, but UNC is the much better shooting team and talent-wise. So in terms of just valuing the possessions that they have, if they both have the same amount of possessions and there's not a giant difference there, the only big difference could potentially be rebounding in UNC's favor, then the better shooting team, that's probably who you're going to go with if there's not really a tug and pull, because Ole Miss's defense is ranked high, but it's purely because of the turnovers. If UNC just doesn't get obliterated in the turnover margin, which I don't think they will, they could, I don't think they will, then it looks relatively good for them to win this game, to be honest. And I'm sorry if I commented and wasn't sure about it and just went with Ole Miss because of the bracket I already did. That's gonna be the one that I ironically am going to change. I'm going to pick North Carolina in that previous bracket I did in the first one instead of Ole Miss in this matchup. So technically here, in my second bracket, I would have the opposite because I think it's still close enough to where you could pick the opposite. But for the cases, just obviously talked about them, and I just went on about how they'll, probably I would pick them in my first main bracket to win. I'll have them right here. But that is one I did more diving into, and I actually like Carolina more now that I think about it. Just kind of going through the next round here, could Louisville beat Auburn? Sure, but I'm not picking a 1 seed to lose in the second weekend if it's, if I'm picking a 1 seed to lose in the second weekend, if I am doing it, it's not going to be Auburn. And there's no way that 2 1 seeds lose, in the second weekend that are this good. So even if it's at home, Auburn they're not fazed by home court at all. And it's not even technically home court. It's just in the same state. And then here you would have Michigan and Yale. Michigan being in the Sweet 16 is actually crazy. It's crazy enough they could do it. I think if Texas A&M gets past Yale, I think you could see Texas A&M in the Sweet 16, but that would be their ceiling. I don't think they would beat Auburn. I know they already did, but Auburn's not losing to the same team twice. And in the last decade, a 13 seed hasn't made the Sweet 16. And the last one that did make the Sweet 16 that was a 13 seed was LaSalle in 2013. But they faced a 12 seed to do it. And in this case, we're having Yale face a 5 seed Michigan. So ironically, in this alternate bracket, Michigan would end up moving forward. And then with Michigan State and New Mexico, I already had it there. Probably the same. It could be interesting because New Mexico actually has the edge in shot value index. They are able to create more possessions for themselves. But the free throws are kind of the biggest thing for me, and Michigan State doesn't mind playing a fast-paced game, which New Mexico does, and there's a big free throw discrepancy there with New Mexico, not a great free throw shooting team. So that's why I would have them there. And then here with, Carolina, Iowa State, I think I would prefer Iowa State here, to be honest, but I'm not 100% sure. They would dominate UNC like they do in kill margins here. The kill shot margins, sorry. They have more shot value indexes, in terms of the amount, than Carolina, which I think that does help a lot with them not having Gilbert out there, Keyshawn Gilbert. But Tamium Lipsey is back. I didn't actually know that before when I made the first video. A few commenters told me. They still are losing all their best lineups, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And UNC is inconsistent, and I would be worried of having them go far with a one quad win squad. And if they are in this scenario, they literally double it versus getting a win versus Ole Miss. They could totally do it, I think, for sure. But it's, this isn't a bad matchup for them. But Iowa State, obviously, without, Gilbert, they're still an elite team, even more defensively, to be honest, with who they're playing more. Offense is kind of the issue there. But unless UNC is crazy offensively, they just don't beat really good defensive teams unless they are anemic on offense like San Diego State was, and they were 111th in the country. So with me knowing Tamium Lipsey would be there, I would have Iowa State moving on in my, kind of actual normal bracket. In this different one, if I am having Ole Miss, I would probably still have Iowa State there. So I think maybe, honestly, I might just have Carolina in both of them. I think I'm just going to do that, to be honest. On the fly, I might just have Carolina in both of them, to be honest. I think I might. I really kind of bought into that matchup there with Ole Miss Carolina. I might just have it in, and then, if you want Carolina winning in the second one, Iowa State winning in the first one, that's fine. But Iowa State will be in the Sweet 16 in my main bracket. I think I am going to have that. And if not, I think it could be Carolina here in this spot for sure. Sorry, we'll get that out of the way there. And then back up here, Auburn, they get a really good path, to be honest. Like, they are not going to lose to a team like Michigan with their crazy turnovers. The closest one is like Bama with that, but Bama, it was on a game winner, and they have the fourth best offense, so that's not Michigan. And then the thing with, we'll switch it back here, Michigan State and Iowa State. Here's the thing. A 1 or 2 seed that wasn't ranked in the preseason has never made the Final Four, and only 5 of a possible 25 2 seeds that fit this, going back to 1985, they, with the latest one being Kansas State, have even gone to the Elite Eight. Only 5 out of the 25 2 seeds that fit the criteria of not being ranked in the preseason and ended up being a 2 seed in the tournament, only 5 of them have ever made the Elite Eight, and the last one was 15 years ago, and it was Kansas State in 2010, and it took a double overtime victory. The Michigan State has the lowest percentage chance to make the Elite Eight of any 2 seed. I had Michigan State in my first bracket because I loved their draw, but now, like, if it's Iowa State, to be honest, I still really don't know. Like, the lineup stuff with Gilbert, like, it really, in my opinion, makes them more of an unknown and worse. I almost ironically feel more comfortable if Carolina wins that game against Iowa State in just picking them to go to the Elite Eight, if I'm being honest. But in the world where Iowa State does win versus Michigan State, like, it would just be so hard for me to pick one of these schools, to be honest, to get here. But I guess I would say it'd be more in line with Michigan State just because of, them getting kind of lucky with the injury stuff in Iowa State. But the only one I could see kind of doing anything like past Auburn of being out of here would be a super hot Carolina team. That's the only one I could see really doing it. But guys, I'm like admitting this is one of the this is the one I could see the most, like with UNC and going past it. It's so weird. And at the same time, I want to tell myself, like, calm down. San Diego State wasn't even a quad 1 win. Like, come on. But even if Carolina gets it, I don't think they're beating Auburn. I don't. Like, at all. I think if they get there, they're not beating them. And so then I ask, like, who is going to beat Auburn if Auburn gets here? Who's beating Auburn in this region? Like, 13 out of the last 14 Final Four teams had an adjusted kill shots conceded of 0.32 per game or less, meaning they don't give up a lot of kill shots. Well, MSU falls just below that, and at some point in March, your team is as good as the players on the court and, the ones that you are across from. And I know with Michigan State, like, just everything about them screams, I'm not a Final Four team, and I've seen them in so many picks. So that's why, like, when they're here, I just have Auburn winning. So then another team that could do it, could it be Iowa State? Maybe, but I don't trust their backcourt right now without Gilbert. And could it be a hot Carolina? I guess, but I wouldn't trust that at all either, and I don't think anyone up here is going to do it because I don't think Auburn's losing early. So it's such a hard area to brought up, and I think that's why you brought up the preseason stat. If Michigan State makes it here, they're not beating Auburn. They're just not. And if it's not Auburn, who else? Who else? A&M, their historical comparisons have, like, Sweet 16 ceilings. Same with Michigan, who's overseeded. Louisville, like, no. So in what could be a weird area here, just for different purposes, I think I could have Iowa State doing that. But I would have to just still go Auburn in this alternate world, because who else are you going to put in here? I'm telling you, Michigan State, if they face Auburn, they're not a Final Four team. And if they don't face Auburn, who's knocking Auburn off? Because it's not Michigan, and it's not A&M, because I don't even know if A&M can get there. And it's not Louisville. So who is it? If you think it's A&M, maybe go for it. But Auburn's not losing to A&M twice. That's for sure, especially the way A&M's just outlook is. So that's why this region is so weird, and I'm so confused by it. But, hey, I guess we'll see kind of what it looks like come, tomorrow. We'll see. Here in the East, the first difference we're probably going to talk about would be Oregon and Liberty. And this is such a, I could care less game, to be honest, for me. If you want to pick the Liberty upset here, go ahead. If you want the extra points, it could happen. There's a massive difference in shot value index in favor of Oregon in this game. So Liberty's going to really have to make all their shots. And, they have an amazing percentage. But realistically, against this kind of bigger competition, I know they don't excel in anything, but just the presence of just a Power 5 team, I don't realistically think they will, but they could. Even if they don't, they still have a chance to beat Oregon because it's Oregon. So I guess I'll go for them here just because, we can say that it's possible for them to do it. But I don't know. I feel like Oregon might even be better just because of the shot value index. But just know I'd probably have Oregon, but for video's sake, let's just go Liberty there because it is possible for sure. BYU and VCU, you see it's not there. Am I going BYU? No, I'm doubling down. It's the same thing. Or not the same thing, that would be next. But I kind of spoil there. But just with VCU, BYU, I'm doubling down. They have giant gap in shot value index, +8 margin, getting 8 possessions away and added from BYU to VCU. VCU is like a mini Houston, and BYU got smacked multiple times by Houston. And VCU is a mini Houston. And then BYU is kind of a more upper school St. Bonaventure with how they play. And VCU smacked St. Bonaventure up. So comparing just what each school is to, different schools that they've played, I'm not shying away from this pick at all. I've seen some people have BYU go super far to the Elite 8, Sweet 16. I'm sticking with VCU here. And then Wisconsin, it is the same thing. It is. Another giant shot value index for VCU. Another +8 margin for them. This was just the perfect draw for VCU, and I'm so happy. Wisconsin gets way less possessions, and they honestly don't shoot as well as you would think. They're around average, and they struggle beating good defensive teams, and that's exactly what VCU is. And they get the advantage in having the possession bonus there. Give me VCU again. And then this is the reason I made the video. First of all, we can just go up here and move these two on because this is all set. This is the reason I made the video right here. St. Mary's versus Alabama. I should have dug into this one more. The possession advantage here heavily, I think more than any actual besides 2 and 15 or 1 and 16 seeds, heavily favors St. Mary's by an insane amount. It's literally +10 shot value index in favor of St. Mary's. They play at such a slow pace, and just the way they close the gap. And then that's how you kind of go about that stuff. By playing at a slow pace, you close the gap on more talented teams because it limits their possessions and, the amount of pace, obviously, they play. It limits the amount of possessions with how slow St. Mary's plays because they obviously are going to be a less talented team than Alabama, and the less possessions there are, the less, obviously if you take a smaller sample size of possessions, the more talented team's not going to always win. The more possessions that are played, normally the more talented team comes out. So St. Mary's perfectly fits the plan to try and limit that, plus obviously having the +10 advantage with turnovers and offensive rebounds. St. Mary's really limits three-pointers and getting to the line. Most of the points from the opponent come from kind of just the 2-point range. And Alabama does have a really high 2-point percentage, but they don't get their points from there. They just kind of get it mainly from threes and the free throw line, unless it's kind of Grant Nelson doing something, and he's injured. And I'm really scared to kind of do it here, but a St. Mary's pick, from what I've looked at, it would not be bad, and it might be good value. And I even kind of dove into a ton of other stuff, and I found it from Will Richard, who I just brought up. Alabama is the only team in the top 25 in KenPom to have a negative shot volume index, and it's at negative 1.2. Alabama's opponents get back 29% of their missed shots, and they commit turnovers on just 13% of possessions. That's almost near the bottom in the country. Alabama also has a higher than average foul rate. Alabama will be just the 10th team in being the most recent one was themselves in 2023, but they'd be just the 10th team to be a top 25 team with a negative shot volume index, but be a top 2 seed. The ones that were kind of near them was like Georgetown in 2008, Kansas in 2013, other stuff like that. But they would have the worst defensive shot volume allowed because they just let the offenses get as many possessions as they want. So defensive shot volume, they do not try and snag away possessions. They just let teams get as many possessions as they damn well please. For this stuff, in terms of what I'm talking about, the similarities between all the teams that I mentioned plus more that are very similar to Alabama with this shot value index that were top 2 to 3 seeds, none of them made the Elite Eight, and only one of them saw the Sweet 16. The average games won with those teams was 2. That was the average, was 2 games. And they were not as glaring of a margin as this one, because some of those teams played some teams that weren't going to take advantage of those possessions. This one is very glaring. In terms of 1 through 3 seeds, there have been 12 1 through 3 seeds with a shot volume index of below -1, which Alabama is at. 4 of them made the Sweet 16. Only one of them saw the Final Four, which was Michigan State. But the rest of them ended up not even seeing the Sweet 16, which would be 75% of them. That'd be 75% of them didn't even see the Sweet 16. And then you can also take a look at here, this chart I'm giving you. It's very complicated, but we're going to look at this area right here, transitions on the far right. A majority of Alabama's points are in transition. Transition depends game to game and from team to team, and how often they turn it over, how quickly they take a shot for you to be able to get a transition and get their defensive rebound there. St. Mary's has the longest possessions in terms of time it takes per possession in the country, and they do a solid job of taking care of the ball. And we just mentioned how Alabama does not really take advantage of getting extra possessions. They kind of just let teams get their possession. So realistically, how many transition points are you going to get? And they are near, in terms of frequency, look, the 80th percentile in Division I. They get a good amount of their points from there. And it's just almost the complete opposite of the matchup that they want. And just to say, the odds of all 1 through 3 seeds making it to the second weekend are very slim. Obviously, there are still, that would be the case because 1 through 3, it's crazy. And I don't even have that. But it's still very low for just all 1s and all 2 seeds. So I think in my normal bracket, I don't know if I have the balls per se to pick St. Mary's in this game. But in terms of the next matchup, VCU also is great, and they're very similar to St. Mary's. And I would take VCU to go the Elite Eight. I'm having that in my normal bracket. I would. I feel confident relatively as much as you can about 11 seed, about doing that. And in this alternative bracket that I can just show you, I think St. Mary's beating them would be a good, get ahead of schedule there. Like I said, in my real run, I'm going, VCU and have them losing. But I can go St. Mary's here. And in this case, St. Mary's technically might be even better. There's a 60% chance that a 7+ seed makes at least the Elite Eight. Now, I wouldn't necessarily have that there. And technically, historical, just looking at the game, it might be better for St. Mary's. Like, they might have the edge in this game. So you could see a St. Mary's just because of who they played in the Elite Eight, which would be crazy. But in this case, I'm just going to ride with my boys VCU. But I think the Alabama stuff with shot volume index, it is crazy how much the deep dive is of St. Mary's actually having a pretty heavy advantage there, plus Grant Nelson not being 100%. In this alternate bracket, I think it wouldn't be bad having Alabama there. And in the previous stuff we just showed you, like I said, the similarities of having, being a high seed and having these terrible margins on shot volume index and, how much they actually take away from their opponent's possessions. None of them made the Elite Eight and only one saw the Sweet 16, and the average wins was 1.9, and this is kind of an even bigger, difference. And between the, 12 1 through 3 seeds that have an actual shot volume index of -1 or lower, only 4 of them made the Sweet 16. That was it. So you have a better chance based on that of Alabama losing in the second round than they do of making it. And that also fits with the stats of just having all 1s and 2 seeds win in the first weekend. Realistically, it's probably not going to happen. There's probably not going to be all 1s and 2 seeds winning in the first weekend. Could it? Absolutely. I think a lot of people will have that. It makes sense. It's hard to pick against it. But I think at least the Sweet 16, they could make the Elite Eight, but that's their absolute ceiling. But after seeing this data and everything, I kind of really want to fade and go with them losing in this, at least Sweet 16 in this alternate bracket second round, which might be crazy, but shot volume index, pretty big discrepancy there with the teams that have been similar to them as top seeds. These aren't just low seeds, as top seeds. And then obviously Duke, I think they just win no matter what. So yeah, in this region, again, I know it's 2 1 seeds. Who's going to beat them? Who's beating them? I don't know who's coming out. I don't know who's beating this team unless Cooper Flagg is so injured and they get even more injuries, or Caleb Love has the greatest game of all time. Who's beating him? I don't know. So crazy East there. Let's go ahead and head to the Midwest. The big one, obviously, Houston versus Gonzaga. It seems like you should pick against them because it's your alternate bracket, right? That would be all the different percentages and stuff, and you could have Gonzaga winning. 1 seeds with a shot volume index of at least 8 or more are 25 and 27 going to the Sweet 16. I know Houston has the lowest percentage chance to make the Sweet 16 out of 1 seeds because of this matchup, but it's the same percentage to make the Sweet 16 as Tennessee. Are you picking Tennessee to lose to UCLA or Utah State? Are you? I don't think so. I don't think you are. And when you put it like that, it obviously makes it seem like a much easier pick. Houston has dominated in the kill shot metrics, which you would think Gonzaga would be really good in, considering the kind of competition they play. I know that they are a heavy underseeded team, but they just got a really bad draw with a really safe team, and I would rather look at it straight up as a game than just try and push for an underseeded narrative that isn't 100%. Underseeded teams don't win all the time. I know I pick like they do, but I try and look at it realistically and be like, yeah, underseeded teams, they don't win all the time. It's not a 100% win rate of going over the expectation for their seed. That's just not the case. On average, at least 1 to 2 teams in the underseeded list disappoint, and at least 1 team on the overseeded they do better than expected, which in this universe, in this case, it would probably be Michigan, or it could be Ole Miss if Ole Miss does better, or if you like Oregon, but it's probably going to be Michigan, and at least in this kind of alternate thing here. So I do still have Houston. I do still have them. 25 and 27 1 seeds are when they have at least an 8 or better shot volume index. in terms of making the Sweet 16. Clemson, McNeese here. I think McNeese, obviously, you would look at it and be like, hey, I picked McNeese here because I had it in one. The more I look at this game, the more I don't want to pick it, even though I really do because it's Will Wade. They don't have an edge on Clemson for anything. Anything. They're similar in pace. They don't have any stats that give them a big advantage. They don't have the shot volume index advantage that, Yale didn't have the advantage, but they were much better than other teams did. VCU had the advantage in a lot of matchups. UC San Diego, big advantage there. I know I picked them to lose, but it's because I had them winning in my main one. What are they able to do? I mean, the kill shots that they have on the surface, look awesome. But then look at this kill shot chart. This adjusts for competition that I showed you earlier with Yale, and they're not that great. They really aren't because of the competition that it adjusts for. So as much as I wanted to pick them, I think looking back at it again, I just don't know how McNeese wins. And, I mean, they could, absolutely. But I don't know how I could pick them because it's just a random ass, hey, pick because I like them. They really don't have a path where you're like, okay, this is exactly what they need to do. This is how they could do it. This is their weakness. For Clemson, it's just not there. Again, could happen because anything could happen, but I don't want to pick it. Just looking at the numbers, I don't want to pick it. And then Purdue High Point, again, I just can't do it. We went over all this stuff last episode of why, and High Point on that kill shot chart is even worse. They're terrible, and that makes me worried. So I just can't do that either. And then here, I think, again, I still like Purdue over Clemson in this matchup because of Clemson's injury that they have to their guard. Illinois versus the play-in Texas or Xavier. Again, I don't know who's coming out, but it's way more interesting, to be honest, of this one. I kind of want to go over the possibility that Illinois does win this game because they absolutely can in the first round. I think Xavier wouldn't be a great matchup for them, but Texas would be a little better. But Texas, I think, is maybe the tiniest bit of a favorite with Xavier, so that's kind of hard to go by. But I think we can just live in this world where Illinois does end up winning. They have the highest percentage chance of any 6 seed to make the Sweet 16. Yeah, Illinois does. And they don't have a giant advantage in shot volume index, but all the teams they play don't either. Specifically, Kentucky. Kentucky's actually the worst out of all of them in terms of shot volume index, and with their injuries, I don't think they're a Sweet 16 team this year, no matter who's here, including Texas, including Xavier. And there's a reason Illinois is the highest percentage chance as a 6 seed to make the Sweet 16. So I think we can live in a world where they are very inconsistent, but they can get to a point where, hey, there's a world where they win 2 games in this tournament because of how inconsistent they are, because they could go on a hot streak for a little bit and win those 2 games, but they could obviously easily lose in the first round. So I'll probably have that happening in one, and then obviously the other one happening in the second one. And then in terms of just the other stuff here, I would still have Tennessee and Houston, and then I think I would still have Houston there. Is it 3 1 seeds? Yeah. Isn't that weird? Because tell me, what else is going to be here? Because if you don't believe in the Gonzaga matchup like I don't, Purdue and Clemson, they're not beating them. Kentucky is absolutely not. And Illinois, if they get as hot as crap, kind of like a UNC thing, maybe. But even then, there have not been anyone close to Tennessee's defense, let alone Houston, and let alone back-to-back. And it would be the greatest 6-seed run ever, beating 3 Kentucky, 2 Tennessee, and 1 Houston. And Tennessee would be the best one, but they are just Houston, but a little bit worse. So if Tennessee has a better game, yeah. But, you could say that for anything. And looking at it objectively, with the 1 seed stuff that we're talking about, Houston looks like they have the best chance here. So that's why it's just so hard and just crazy. And so with this being in mind, now we can jump over to the West to see what is going on over there. And then with here, UConn does have the shot volume index and kill shot edge against Oklahoma. So in this hypothetical, I think UConn would be a fine pick as well. I'm not necessarily tailored to one or the other. I do just like the research I did in finding an edge with Oklahoma, but UConn could absolutely win there too. Drake as the alternative here, I think could be there as well, absolutely. And one I would totally pick. Drake does have the shot volume edge as well against Missouri. They play really slow, similar to kind of the reasoning we did with St. Mary's versus Alabama. I do prefer Missouri, but Bennett Sturtz is going to be the best player on the court. And again, similar thing to St. Mary's, they played a really slow tempo. They're going to try and limit the possessions to make up for the talent gap there. I think Missouri handles it much better, but they're still in a similar mold with the Alabama great offensive teams. And in the world where we're looking at that and saying, hey, objectively, would you do this for the other way around? Because this could happen. Yeah, I would, and I think we can have Drake right there as well. And then with here, like I think Florida still I would have winning this. And then we're looking at alternative stuff, and Florida winning that Maryland game obviously, could happen. St. John's against KU, probably not going to happen. And then you got Texas Tech here, and then look where we're at. Either Texas Tech or Florida. And I feel way more comfortable about Florida. And that's how it could be. That's how it could be. I didn't even have to get into crazy, numbers stuff with you. And like I did with the other stuff, just to hammer the point. And look where we're at. Of we're looking at the possibility of, hey, this is what it's looking like. And this is the one with the most, I think, volatility for the 1 seed. They have to go through a super hard road. But could they beat Maryland and then Texas Tech or St. John's, who's there? St. John's, absolutely. Texas Tech, yeah, for sure. Maryland, hard. But yeah, they could. Absolutely. So then you're looking at literally 4 1 seeds for the first time since 2008. And it fits the exact stuff that we were talking about with the efficiency here of these 1 seeds and the strength that they have. And it's just so hard to go through an exercise and pick where you don't have all the 1 seeds winning this year. I mean, look, this is how it could get. I know it's crazy, especially because it was supposed to be an alternate bracket. But, I mean, this is, for me, this is where it comes to. Like, when I go through these exercises, and I can just pull it up here just to show you. Like, it is just so hard to not pick the 1 seeds here of going over who's going to beat them. Yeah, I know Florida couldn't come out of here, but I didn't have them coming out last time. And then realistically, we went through all these other ones of who could possibly come out. If this was actually here and history did repeat itself with what we're looking at as, hey, we're going based on trusting the teams. If it were to get to this, I would say Florida, Duke, and then Duke is your national champion. That would be what I would do if we were to get to this spot. And is this a poor decision for someone to make for their alternate bracket? No, it's not. Because if there were to be a year for 2008 to repeat itself, all 1 season in the Final Four, it would be this year. It would. Even though the numbers tell us that that is probably not the case, it would be this year. And as someone who's just really diving into the numbers and trying to find out areas to, squeak out differences, it's so hard for me to find that. It really is. Because especially looking at, alternative stuff, you can look at the one I mainly did. I had 3 1 seeds. I did, because it's so hard to not pick them. Especially for what I view with, all of them at the same time do have issues. Cooper Flagg, injury. Auburn, they've lost 3. They're probably playing, I'd say, the lowest or worst out of the 1 seeds. Florida, the hardest region, but they're playing the best out of the 1 seeds. Houston, super safe, but they play Gonzaga, one of the craziest anomalies we've seen in the second round as an 8 seed. So that it's just so hard to not have them here, but at the same time you can nitpick every single one of them, but also you got to look who's going to take their place and do you feel confident about. And it's just the idea of, do you go with the just actual bracketology stuff of how low of a chance this is of all these 1 seeds making the Final Four, let alone making the Elite 8? Or is it going with the idea and the numbers of these are the greatest 1 seeds we've ever seen? And that could very well be the possibility. And if it does happen, I think this would be it. But that's not fun. You don't want that, right? We don't want that. So here, You want fun? Do you want some fun? I'll show you some fun. We can go ahead here and go ahead and do this, and this. That could be realistic right there. You want another one? Boom. There's some fun right there. You want to go here? I'll show you some fun. You want this? Boom. That doesn't happen. And then obviously we can have this and then this. Actually, I don't like this. I don't trust them. And then on this side right here, you want some crazy? Not going to happen because Duke's not, missing the Final Four. But you want some actual fun mix-up brackets? Boom, there you go. There you go. Actually, no, it doesn't even happen. There you go. There you go. And then here we have this. And then if this would be the case, this is my title game. Boom. Are you happy? There's the end of the video. There's your alternate bracket. Have fun. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that crazy yet. I'll do an actual outro for you guys. Sorry if this one was all over the place, but I wanted to go through and just really harp on you how crazy this year is and how just insane the numbers say these 1 seeds are and how hard it is to not pick them. Yet at the same time, they all have flaws in their areas. And combined with that, the historical data tells us that it's the odds of them all doing this are so low. But if it were to happen, it would be this year. So I want to tell you, if you think it's going to happen, do it. If you don't think it's going to happen, do it. I'm not trying to tell you one way or the other. I think that crazy bracket at the end is still something that could totally happen. One thing I would say to probably not do would be for just stuff that I personally have looked at. I think having at least 2 1 seeds in the Final Four would be ideal, at least 2. I think the lowest seed that could possibly make it would be a 5 seed based on historical stuff. And even then, the 5 seeds don't look great. So I'd say maybe a 4 seed would be the lowest we would look at. And in terms of teams that I don't think you should have in the Final Four, the ones that fit it are St. John's and Michigan State. No preseason unranked team who finished as a 1 or 2 seed has ever made the Final Four, ever. Going back to 85. Never happened. And I think both of these teams are lowest percentage to do it for a reason. And New Mexico, St. John's even fits the team profile of teams that don't make it to the Final Four. Michigan State would have the slight edge of being able to, but even then, I don't think they could either. And unfortunately, we have injuries and all this stuff, but that's what makes the bracket crazy. That's what it does. Like, I'm sure you didn't expect the Alabama St. Mary's stuff. Insane. So whatever you think is going to happen, go ahead and put it down. Go ahead and do it. Again, I would suggest around 4 to 5 first-round upsets, and then at least 1 double-digit seed making it to the Sweet 16, maybe a little bit farther. But hey, it's March. Madness is here, and I can't wait. Hopefully you enjoyed. You only have 1 day to watch this video before the tournament actually starts. Maybe you'll watch it after it starts and tell me how crazy this was, whether it was totally right or totally wrong. But either way, hope you enjoyed watching. Stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.